All right, welcome everybody to the Daring and Caring Women Leaders for Positive Impact. Nancy.
Thank you, Crystal. Welcome everyone. And it is good evening, good morning. This brand is going global, which is amazing. We've had some incredible global speakers, and we certainly hope to have many, many more. Before we get into our program today, I want to begin with gratitude. First of all, to thank all of you for joining us today. I think you will be, my new favorite word is illuminated and inspired with our two guest speakers. But I want to thank Crystal in particular, who's done all of the technology and all of the promotion and marketing, which is exceptional. If I had to do it, we wouldn't be doing anything. We'd be watching soap operas. And the other person I really want to thank is Paul Chapman from RBC. Paul and I have been working together for the last 4 years. And RBC is really stepping up and doing a lot in supporting women. Most recently, the Lisa LaFlamme evening, which was sponsored by RBC Wealth Management. Paul had some guests that evening, and we certainly had a wonderful time. So Paul, maybe you want to come on and just say a few words about your support for Women Worth and Wellness.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Nancy. Great to see everybody. As always in this series, we've had some great speakers, and we've got 2 more today. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I've been very excited and honored to be able to work with Nancy and Women Worth and Wellness and that brand and that community that you've built. And when it comes to today's topic, this makes me reflect a little bit on how I've been lucky enough to have learned and had mentors and worked under a number of women leaders throughout my career in capital markets and wealth management now, and in our family business from my own, of course, my mother taking over our family business for a number of years after my father suddenly passed away when I was young, and she was a strong leader for the business and the family. And my wife started a business, Sapsucker, that many of you maybe know. It's a maple water drink, and it's been interesting to see the leadership of a notable woman, Arlene Dickinson, in her endeavors and the venture capital and how she leads through this and breaks through barriers. It's really amazing. So I see these empowered women embracing their narrative and becoming their own heroes and creating better and brighter cultures and workspaces and overall environments, and both at home and at work. So I'm really excited to be able to work with this great group. Thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, RBC. I just want to give you a little bit of background on Women Worth and Wellness. It's a brand that I created in 1994 when I was a private client wealth advisor, and a lot of my clients were female. And of course, talking about wealth all the time is not really the ideal focus, because we all know if we don't have our health, we're not going anywhere anytime soon. And I think COVID has taught us that in spades. So the focus of the Women Worth and Wellness brand is targeting boomer women and their daughters and granddaughters now, they're the up and comers, to be healthy. And that means mentally and physically, obviously wealthy with the ideal scenario in place, and enhancing your net worth and your self-worth. And once you have your whole own program together, that's when we can think about philanthropy and legacy planning and giving back. So it's very much a circular situation. This whole series was created last fall as we thought about the year ahead post-COVID. And as Barack Obama said some time ago, what the world needs, what he thought the world needed was more Canada. We said, you know what, coming out of post-COVID and the Ukrainian challenge, there's just so much going on in the world that we need more women leaders who are going to step up and have positive impact. And so that's where the theme came from. And over the last month, every Monday, start the year strong, start the week strong. We've had amazing guest speakers. We've had 6 and 2 more today. And with that in mind, who knew that we would finish this series honoring an incredible daring and caring women leader whose positive impact is just rippling through. And that's Hazel McCallion, who most of you will know passed away yesterday at the age of 101. Now, I don't think Hazel ever backed down from anything, and she wasn't quite sure about the hurricane, Hazel, but she knew that when a hurricane came through, it stirred up a lot of stuff, and often things were better as a result of it. So the whole theme of this series is for us to be like Hazel. If you can see it, you can be it. And that is really step up with your uniqueness and keep on going. And know that there's tremendous support in the community to help you do that, because we know that women can make incredible positive impact. So if we can see it, we can be it. And I will now turn it over to Crystal, who will introduce our first guest speaker. And by all means, put your comments and questions in the chat. And at the end, have to answer some of those.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nancy. All right. Let's kick this off. We have our first speaker with us, Deborah Rosati. And Deborah is a valued corporate director, an accomplished business savvy entrepreneur, and a fellow chartered professional accountant with over 35 years of high growth and transformational leadership experience in the technology, consumer, retail, cannabis, life sciences, private equity, and venture capital industries. She's also the founder and CEO of Women Get On Board, and 850 plus member-based social purpose company that connects, promotes, and empowers women on corporate boards. Her passion fuels Deborah's work ethic, and she's a steadfast champion of corporate governance, ESG, sustainability, and board diversity throughout her board leadership and advocacy for her social purpose. So we are very, very honored and welcome and excited to have you today. Deborah, welcome. Please join us online.
Well, thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, Paul, for being an ally and champion for empowering women. Thank you for your kind introduction. I'm honored today to stand on the shoulders of the remarkable women who have shared their stories during your Women Worth and Wellness series on daring and caring women leaders for positive impact. As we were preparing before the session, not only am I sharing my story, but as a successful businesswoman, I'm learning from all the other women that have come before me. So thank you all. Today, we're going to talk about how to be your own hero, and I hope to illuminate you on how to elevate yourself to a higher purpose. So when I reflected on my life, I like to think that my life is in 3 chapters. It has been broken into 3 chapters. And these 3 chapters are defined by Gina Cody, another very successful immigrant, successful woman, engineer and business leader. There is an engineering school in Concordia named after her. She defined the 3 chapters of your life. Chapter 1 is preparing for your life's work. Chapter 2 is doing your life's work. And chapter 3 is giving back to your life's work. So let's begin. My first chapter, preparing for my life's work. I began my life's work. I always wanted to be a businessman, just like my father. I was inspired by my father. He was a self-made, entrepreneurial, and a well-respected businessman. He was a Dutch immigrant, and he came to Canada when he was 14 years old. He was put into grade 1 because he didn't speak English. No way was that going to work for my father. So I am grateful for his fortitude, his resilience, his persistence, and his passion for doing good. So I decided I would go to business school. I enrolled in the co-op accounting program at Brock University, which was the first year they had it. I started articling as a CA student, which we're called CPAs now, when I was 19. And when I was in my second work term, I had a senior partner tell me uncategorically that I would never be a CPA. Imagine how career limiting that would be. I chose not to let him define me, who I was, or whom I was going to be. I worked hard, and by the time I was 24, I had become a CA, and my professional career was well under its way. Stories in that chapter of my life, preparing for my life's work, was I was mistaken quite often for the coffee girl. I was mistaken as the EA to my boss. I was never really taken seriously as an aspiring woman business leader. But through hard work, determination, fortitude, and resilience, which my father taught me, always taking on challenge and going outside my comfort zone, made me ready for my next chapter. Chapter 2, doing your life's work. This chapter for me was about being curious, being courageous, and always be learning. This led me to my first job outside of public accounting. It was in the tech sector in 1987 in Ottawa, and the business intelligence technology was just forming. I was drawn to emerging technologies and new opportunities, and this really challenged me to go outside my comfort zone. My boss at the time was the corporate controller. He suggested I take a public speaking course, as I'd be presenting to executives at that particular public technology company. So I took a Dale Carnegie course, and that course taught me the 3 C's or 3 E's of public speaking. And those 3 C's are: you've earned the right to speak about it, you're excited to present, and you're eager to share your insights, knowledge, experience to elevate others. So hopefully today I will apply those 3 E's while speaking to you all. I was very fortunate to have a very successful career in the tech sector that evolved from being a policy analyst to a corporate controller to a CFO, and then finally to a general partner in a venture capital firm, all by the time I was in my early 40s. And then my career as a corporate director began over 2 decades ago, before there was formal governance certification programs, before there was mentorship programs, and before corporate director was a profession unto itself. In this chapter, I had great mentors. They were always men. They were my sponsors, they were my allies, they were my confidants, and they pushed me to excel in my career and be my own hero, following my own destiny and not being defined by someone else. Also, I guess I was a trailblazer because I didn't have a Hazel Hurricane ahead of me, who at least was in my circles at that time. I didn't have a female role model in this chapter or my previous chapter. So I was a trailblazer. And there's some examples I want to share with you that I think back on in this chapter. I would follow my male colleagues into the men's bathroom. Kind of presumptuous, if you might think, but that's where the decisions were being made. So one time I startled them and they came out of the men's bathroom and I was about to go in, and I think, say no further, it was quite clear that the decisions couldn't be made in the male's bathroom while I was a general partner and had a decision-making role as well. Next, as a CFO of the tech startup, there was 3 founders and myself. And every Christmas, our chair of the board would invite those 3 founders for an appointment for a tailor-fitted suit. Not me. I guess I'll take pride that maybe I was dressing professionally already. And then third, I have 2 sons. And when my oldest son was 6 years old, he woke up one early Saturday morning while I was working, and he asked if he could help me. And he said, "Mom, I know what you do." And I said, "What do I do?" And he said, "You raise capital." Very astute at that age. He also told me to just send money and the other mummies will bake the cookies. So I am very fortunate that my sons were great allies of myself as a businesswoman. To my next chapter, chapter 3, giving back to your life's work. I knew my life had a higher purpose, and that was to serve where sacrifice and leadership meet. To quote Ruth Bader Ginsburg, real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. As a corporate director in this 3rd chapter, I'm proud to have served on corporate boards for over 2 decades. I've learned that it's not what you know, but it's how you say it. I've had to train my sense of emotional intelligence, my EI, at the boardroom table, including paying attention to everything from verbal communication to body language to tone of voice to my social graces. I've been around some of the best and brightest board members who have inspired me to reach higher levels in the boardroom. I've also been around board members who needed more emotional intelligence, with their social graces absent and their boardroom presence quite uninspiring. I've thought through and how I can share my messaging on bringing your emotional intelligence into the boardroom, and I've characterized them into 4 C's: your competency, your courage, your character, and your chemistry. The boardroom is all about minding your P's and Q's, often overlooked, but it can carry a huge payoff as a more cohesive and aligned board that effectively makes better business decisions. I want to share my 4 C's with some stories. On competency, competency is really your unique value proposition that you bring to the board. And Crystal, you did a very good job of defining my elevator pitch. I'll just sum it up again. I have entrepreneurial, financial, and governance expertise with high growth and transformational companies in technology, retail, consumer, cannabis, and the venture capital sector. Understanding your competency is essential for your emotional intelligence because it helps you understand what you know, but also where you need to rely on others. The second C is courage. In my personal experience, people often hesitate to exercise their courage. For example, I was appointed chair of a not-for-profit board. The founder and the CEO needed to be replaced. And when I say needed, definitely needed. But no one was willing to bring that change or issue to the table. As the new chair, I had to step up with the courage to make the change. It was a difficult decision, and I had to get the board on side before we could act. But it was the right decision for the organization at that time. This is an example of power of courage in the boardroom. The third C is character. This character is how you demonstrate how you show up. And through my board journey, I think my character is actually strengthened. And I have an example where I was interviewed for a board opportunity in 2015 when the CEO said he wasn't interviewing me because I was a woman. I paused. I thought, that's not how you start a board interview. I realized I had two choices. I could be offended, choice one, and leave, or choice two, I could lean in. I took choice two. I chose to lean in and I said, I'm not here because I'm a woman. I'm here because I add value to your board. Then we engaged in a 2-hour strategy discussion of the company and the industry. I chose not to proceed with that particular board opportunity because I didn't feel it was the right culture fit for me. So I'm very proud that I demonstrated character in the moment. I had to work hard on it. And then chemistry is really how you show up and the relationships. And I have an example of, I used to have a board member after a board meeting would call me up and yell at me. And I knew he wasn't yelling at me because there was something I did. He was just really frustrated. So I would just kind of talk him off the ledge and say, okay, Bill, if we do X, Y, Z, how do you feel? Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So I think I gained his trust and knew kind of he was a very successful business man and was just frustrated. And so I used my trust with him to make change, and it was an amazing relationship. One might be fearful if one of your board members called you up and was yelling, but I knew it wasn't personal, and I knew that I was leaning in and it was the right thing to do to build on that. My other area of my third chapter is being a change agent. And as Crystal alluded to, after 15 years of being one of the few, if not only woman on a board, and having many women ask me how I got on my first corporate board, I decided it was time to create a social purpose company that was bigger than myself and launched Women Get On Board in 2015. And as Crystal said, we're 850 members growing across the country, and our mandate is to connect, promote, and empower women to corporate boards. My goal is to get one more woman on a board, one board at a time. And I like to think the power of 3. 1 woman on a board is the beginning, 2 women on a board is presence, and 3 women in the boardroom is a voice. So let's collectively elevate one another to be board leaders. It is powerful and it is our time. The stories I want to share with you as a change agent, I had one very accomplished corporate director, woman corporate director, who generationally was a generation ahead of me, told me she didn't understand why I was focused on elevating other women in the boardroom. You know, you should just focus on your own corporate director role. That wasn't the right, that was not the conversation I was expecting. Secondly, saying no to board opportunities. I like to think of as women, we can elevate and pay it forward for others. So anytime I've said no to a board opportunity, I like to think of who are the other 3 women I'd like to put forward. And I've seen some women do a phenomenal job of that. And I've seen other women just say no and they move on. So my call to action for all of you is, if you are being considered for a board opportunity and it's not the right fit or capacity issues, make sure you have 3 other women you can put forward. And the third point I want to leave with you is make sure you network. network, network, network. However, you got to give more than you get, than you take. And then in your networking, give generously and accept graciously. And what I want to leave you with are my 3 words for 2023. They are elevate, innovate, and sustain. And I've been using the hashtag my 3 words each year since 2015. It's from Chris Brogan's idea. And these 3 words are really, it's not a New Year's resolution. They're just words that guide you through the year and help you make decisions and help you focus. And write them down every day. They're on my screen. I can't miss them. I blogged about it at the beginning of the year. I've sort of told the world my 3 words are elevate, innovate, and sustain. And why did I pick these words and what did they mean to me? Elevate is really to lift or make higher. So on my elevate story, I like to think it allows me to improve myself or someone else by improving them morally, intellectually, or culturally. I'll work with others on elevating themselves, but I have to elevate myself first. And by elevating others, it's listening to them, learning, and being filled with gratitude. On the innovate is to make changes, do something in a new way. And as an entrepreneur, innovation is every day. So I want to make sure that I'm always innovating. I have an innovative mindset. And I want to I want to show up personally and professionally, looking at ways to make changes to make the world a better place. And then my 3rd word is sustain, to support something or keep it going. Sustain is my daily mantra of why I show up each day to be a better version of myself. I would try to sustain others by showing up every day in the service of others to help them be a better version of themselves. So thank you for your time. May you elevate yourself to a higher purpose.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Deborah. The thing that I love when I see someone presenting like you is the joy that you're feeling in your heart with everything that you're doing. And the logo that I created for Women Worth and Wellness is exactly that. Like you're just reaching, you're joyful and you're moving forward. I love your men's bathroom example. That's exactly the kind of thing that I would do. And if I'm with those 2 other women on the board, we can have a Congo line right in past them and say, okay, boys, you really want to do this? Or you want to come out and we can have a conversation. But I love your Women Get on Board. You're really, really, really making a huge difference. I'm delighted to be a member. I'm delighted to be on LinkedIn with you. And I will encourage all of our guests today to be on LinkedIn with all of our guests, because they post lots of fabulous content for you to assimilate, comment on, pass along, whatever. I mean, LinkedIn is really, really a powerful tool. So Deborah, thank you so much. I will pass back to Crystal to introduce our next speaker and leave some time for Q&A at the end.
Fantastic. Deborah, if you could put your information in the chat, your LinkedIn link, that would be great. So people could connect with you, or any other information that you would like to share with them of ways they can connect with you. All right. Just a moment. Okay. Ooh, I'm excited. We have our next amazing speaker. We have Inez. Inez is, I got to say her name properly. And every but just a moment here, we got somebody here. So Inez Jabalpurwala, I hope I said that right. I said you I gave you honor of your name. She has extensive experience building and leading organizations and cross-sector collaborations in health research, academia, and international development. She is currently executive leader of Cohen Veterans Biosciences Brain Health Nexus, a global collaboration to unleash science and technology to optimize brain health and prevent brain disease. She is also global director of Vinex, a nonprofit corporation initiated by the private medical device company Rocket Science Health to understand how viruses and other infectious agents may affect the central nervous system. She's passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion in science and in society. She has mentored young women throughout her career, including through the Women's Executive Network, McGill University, Faculty of Management, and Lawrence Scholars Program. Inez was named one of the Canada's most powerful women, top 100 of the Women's Executive Network in the Trailblazers and Trendsetters category in 2007, 2016, and 2022. We are very honored to have you here today. Inez, would you please join us?
Thank you so much. And first of all, Deborah, I do want to say that not only have you been a trailblazer, but you continue to be a trailblazer and a real inspiration to women across this country. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. I want to first thank Nancy for this invitation, and to both you and Crystal and Paul for all that you're doing to create platforms for women to be inspired and enlightened, to form connections and a community. I've watched and I've learned from all 6 of the previous speakers, and many of the wisdoms they shared resonate with my own narrative. Now, there are experiences in all of our lives that reveal truths and shape the course of our personal and professional paths. I'll share my 3 truths with you today. The first is to be the hero of your own narrative, because in someone else's narrative, the most that you can ever aspire to be is a supporting character. When I was in grade school, I received an award for public speaking. And as I approached the presenter who stumbled pronouncing my name, he said, "Don't worry, someday you'll get married and you can change that name." Until that moment, it never occurred to me that there was something wrong with my name. And more important to a child, that others thought there was something wrong with my name. It made me self-conscious, but also determined to prove that I could create my own narrative and be the hero of that narrative, rather than being reduced to a supporting character in someone else's narrative. I didn't want my validation to come from anyone else. I loved what Karen Kearney said: "Don't let bullies define the narrative of who you are." I worry today about young people, and young women in particular, who follow social media only to believe that the lives of others are better, richer, and more meaningful. It takes energy away from making their own narrative great, rich, and meaningful. And understanding the power of narrative is understanding the power of invention and reinvention. This gave me the courage to take risk and to be an entrepreneur. So after 2 business degrees, rather than embarking on a career at an established organization, in 2001, I accepted an offer to build a new social impact venture to advance brain research in Canada. Building from the ground up is hard, and it can be lonely. I spent many late nights in an office that was so small, I had to move my chair to one side in order to open the window. And I was always trying to figure out what were the next steps. You have to persevere, even when it feels like you're pushing a boulder up a mountain. And you have to get energy from small steps and small successes. You have to be willing to do every task, big or small. There's no one to hide behind. You have to deliver. And you learn fast that the only way to succeed in executing a vision is by inspiring others to join you on your journey. And eventually, the momentum becomes unstoppable. But entrepreneurship is not the same as ownership. And Irving Azoff famously advised musical artists that the most important thing is to own your publishing. As women, we put in the sweat equity, but sometimes in our desire to ensure that there is a collective ownership of everything we do, we let others own our narrative and our successes. What you create is what has value. A great leader always recognizes the contributions of others. A smart businesswoman owns her successes and leverages them for the future. Also from Karen Kearney, take credit for the good things we do. Children of immigrants are told to work hard and to not expect anything to be given to them. And work became my sole focus for too long, because I believed that would be my pathway to security. But I learned that working hard is not enough, and that once you build success, people who often have the least right to claim ownership may come out of the woodwork. They'll try to fill your head with the idea that you were just lucky or at the right place at the right time, or that there must have been someone standing behind you propelling you forward. They'll feed any insecurities that you never belonged where you got. And they'll try to convince others that you were fine for phase 1, but now it's time to move on to the next phase. So you have to put in measures to protect what is yours to the extent that you can. And while the idea of ownership may seem counter to building to have social impact, the work is the same, and there are many sacrifices that you have to make, both financial and time. So when you finally have created something of value, you don't just want to get pushed aside. But if and when it is time to move on and know that your value is not tied to one particular organization or to another person. It's yours to take with you as you move forward with your narrative. So after what felt like a lifetime building one venture, I had to reinvent. And it was a hard climb back, harder still to learn to let go of something that was so tied to my soul and to just keep pushing forward. But driving while looking through the rear mirror is never a good idea. Not only will you crash, but you'll miss seeing the opportunities ahead. And the silver lining of living through hard times, you find out who's still there and who quietly fades out of your life. I heard something the other day. You can make a choice to be a victim or to be a warrior. I say choose to be a warrior every time. Control your own narrative and respect and honor the narratives of others. My second revelation has been to recognize that wisdom comes from many different sources, and diversity is the way to achieve inclusive excellence. This is true in science and in society. Sherry Graydon talked about how women experience the world differently and make a difference when they're at the table, sharing insights, participating in decisions. In science, there's been a reckoning of the underrepresentation of women in diverse cultural communities, both in who's being studied and who's leading research. More than 80% of clinical trials are conducted in developed countries, and women and female animal models and members of diverse cultural communities are still underrepresented in all of research. These statistics are alarming in an era of personalized preventive care and personalized medicine. How can we personalize when our data is so incomplete and skewed? We don't expect the average shoe or dress size to fit everyone, but for too long we accepted a one-size-fits-all approach to research and care that does not take into consideration the biological and non-biological variability of different peoples around the world. The rationale for leaving behind some cultural communities and countries used to be that the infrastructure just doesn't exist to expand trials to include them. There was also work to do to build trust with communities that had been exploited in the past to benefit the dominant cultural community. Black people who were told they were given a vaccine to protect against syphilis, but were really given a placebo so that researchers could see how untreated syphilis would progress. Populations in certain countries being enrolled as subjects in trials that would not have been approved in developed countries. Or even the unevenness of applying scientific advances. The horrific recent discovery that Indigenous children had been fed unpasteurized milk and contracted fatal tuberculosis decades after we learned how to pasteurize milk and only fed this milk to the rest of the population. With the advent of wearables and digital data collection, we now have the ability to be more inclusive. And I would argue that developed countries have disproportionately benefited from science discoveries and have the moral imperative to ensure that we contribute to resourcing these studies and that these studies be co-designed and co-led to reflect and serve different priorities and realities. Inclusive data collection is important when we think about brain health, a concept that flips the script from a deficit model of care at crisis points to an asset model of prevention, wellness, and optimization across the lifespan. Brain health, like heart health, varies by individual, and it fluctuates across the lifespan. It's not one size fits all. Brain health is impacted by the rest of our human body and by the external environment, including, for example, nutrition, climate change, and pollution. And by the way, these are examples where low and middle income countries bear a disproportionate burden of impacts. There's no better example of how the external environment and what happens in one system of the human body can impact the brain than the multi-system impacts of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which includes brain health impacts and long COVID. Understanding how viruses and other infectious agents impacts brain health became the focus of my second building venture with businessman and philanthropist Ken Irving, called Viral Neuroexploration, or VINEX, founded just as the pandemic was spreading around the world in early 2020. As the pandemic raged on, the President of the United States declared that the country is in a mental health crisis, And we've seen the same in Canada and around the world. Part of this is triggered by the effects of being in a pandemic, and part by the virus itself. What's important to understand, there are actions we can take to build resilience and to maintain our brain health across our lifespan. But we need to measure and monitor our brain health and understand our individual risk factors. We now have the ability not just to collect, but to aggregate different kinds of data. For example, health combined with environment. And we have more sophisticated AI and machine learning tools to analyze this data. And finally, we have a growing commitment to share data globally and investments by governments, philanthropists, and venture capital to find solutions for achieving brain health for all citizens around the world. My third building venture was initiated by the brilliant CEO and president of Cohen Veterans Bioscience in the US, Magali Haast, and is focused on brain health across the lifespan, our greatest asset for social and economic prosperity. While the focus of our research must be inclusive, so too must we include diverse peoples in conducting research. Desiree Bombenon talked about the status quo being the enemy of progress and how we need to disrupt to stretch boundaries. I would add that disruption means changing our definition of excellence to be inclusive. When research and programming fail to include diversity in all forms, including younger scientists, we solve for the same problems in the same ways with the same priorities and targets. We also introduce bias in the process and in the outcomes. Diversity leads to new thinking and new approaches, and that's how we change paradigms. We need to stop making the excuse that we tried to find diversity, but those candidates just didn't meet the excellence bar. There's excellence all around us, but we have to be prepared to change what has been the status quo. I like the paradox of the most exciting science happening at points of intersection and where there is divergence. Intersection because we need a convergence of different fields and disciplines to address complex challenges. For example, to drive a greater understanding of the link between the environment, animal, and human health. My own career path began by making the case that the brain is one interconnected system with common underlying mechanisms across what used to be considered distinct diseases and disorders. And then as a logical extension, that we need to expand brain research beyond neuroscience to include other fields and disciplines to understand brain function and dysfunction. Divergence because science advances when we give platforms and opportunities to diverse people and encourage risk-taking to pursue bold ideas that may be outliers from the dominant paradigms. And I think this applies to all businesses, which are leaders and innovators. And finally, but the truth closest to my heart, is to live life with gratitude and pay it forward. Maybe because he died earlier this month and I was a fan, the words of the musical artist David Crosby come to mind. He said that what you do to yourself is what you do to yourself. You can either be proud of it or disgusted by it, but it's not really a moral thing. What you do to other human beings, that counts. We hear lots about the power of kindness, and I think it's a choice that we make every day in every action. And it stems from living your life with gratitude, what keeps us humble in good times and gets us through the more challenging ones. When you believe that you have much to be grateful for, you have an abundance that you can then pay forward, to lift and empower others, to mentor and share wisdom, to leave the world a little better in whatever way you can. And in turn to recognize that no one achieves any degree of success without a community of champions and supporters. I had two great mentors in Alan R. Taylor and the late Michael H. Wilson, but so many others who contributed to my growth. And I have team members who stayed loyal to me and continue to fuel me and make so much possible. And part of paying it forward is speaking up for those who may not have the privileges to be listened to and believed. My first degrees were in English literature, and in my first year as an undergraduate, I read a line by Dante that has inspired many people throughout history. He said that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality. Martin Luther King Jr. expressed a version of the Dante line, "A time comes when silence is betrayal." This has compelled me through my life to stand up for principles, to be a change agent, and to use my voice whenever I can to advance causes that are meaningful to me and important to society. Lisa Gable said, everything comes down to people and building connections and relationships with generosity, compassion, and empathy, not just to drive our own goals, but to contribute to theirs, being committed to someone else's welfare. I often say that the brain is nothing without the heart, because it's important to remind people that while we are so focused on creating intelligence, human and artificial, we equally need to put value in human compassion. And that means choosing to focus on the good, even in those moments where people may be unkind to us. In research, this comes down to a human-centered approach, understanding lived experience and quality of life priorities, and setting those as outcome goals. Long COVID disproportionately impacts women, but when this phenomena first arose, they struggled to be believed and to receive care. Social media gave them a platform to organize, and when thousands of voices joined together, long COVID got on the radar of the media and governments. The power of connection. And connection doesn't just serve to advance specific goals, it's also one of the pillars of brain health, protecting against memory loss, and it's the way to a happier life. The results of a major happiness study out of Harvard found that the most important indicator of happiness is how many deep and meaningful connections you have. They measured this by asking the question, how many people could you call at 3 a.m. if you needed to talk to someone? And to me, all of this, the power of narrative, the power of diversity, and the power of connection ties to Frances Wright's belief that we as women have a role to play in building Canada and the world by reimagining a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. But we need to show up, to step up, to speak out, and to shore up others. And finally, to come full circle with my own story, there's no retiring because one chapter has come to an end. We can have many lives. We simply need to retire, to put on a new set of tires and find new roads to travel. As Nancy likes to say, no rest, no rust. These days, my eyes are firmly on the road ahead, advancing brain research and care at a global level. Because what keeps me excited about life is what I'm building now and where I'll be in the future. And that is the real power of owning your own narrative.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. You and Deborah are change agents to the max. I'm so, so, so happy that you both came and shared your story. But, you know, again, referring back to Hurricane Hazel, she was literally somebody who showed up all the time and stepped up, showed up and stepped up and didn't back off. And again, going back to what the whole theme is and why we're doing what we're doing, it's all about mindset, and owning your own narrative is spot on. So thank you, Inez. That was fabulous. Really, really, really good. Crystal, do we have questions in the chat before we run out of time?
We do. Let me just go back a bit.
And
All right.
choose to be a warrior. Disrupt. I love that. I love disrupting.
Deborah, when you were talking, please give us an example of how you said something that enabled others to hear your message.
Great question. I think you have to find your voice, and there's different ways to find that voice. There have been, so an example, I had joined a board, and it was quite clear that one of the board members didn't fit on that board. Instead of making an issue at the time, I worked with the chair of the board behind the scenes to find a graceful exit for that board member. And I knew that I was very instrumental behind the scenes and it was very effective, but I chose not to be confrontational. I chose to do it in a very graceful way. And so I think I pick my moments where I can and where I can have the most impact. So I think it was quite clear. Others weren't quite sure what to do, but I leaned in from a governance perspective and had the voice and had the ear of the chair of the board, and he really relied on me through that process. So that's an example where my message was clear, but it didn't have to be exactly pounding the chest. I think, finding the social graces and ways to conduct yourself, whether it be in the boardroom, whether it be in a presentation, any gathering that you're showing up. So finding your voice and having impact.
Fabulous. And I mean, this question came up before you spoke, Inez, but I believe it's relevant to you too. So give us an example when you said something that enabled others to hear your message as well.
I think if you want others to hear your message, what's important is that you're a great listener. And for me, it's always been about how do I seek out the people that are being served and listen, and then be able to translate what they're saying into messages to audiences that they normally wouldn't have access to. So in science and research, it's about how do you bridge that gap between the people who are doing the research and the science and the people who are actually being served. Let them determine what are the priorities, what's important to them for quality of life, and then how does that translate back to how do we set research priorities and goals that are going to meet those.
Perfect. Next question I have is, what would you tell 20-year-old self if you knew then what you knew now? And what are some of the key things you would tell yourself to trailblaze and be a leader, a woman leader? We'll start with you, Deborah.
Is that because D comes before I?
That's right, alphabetical order.
Anyway, what I would tell my younger self, 20, so first chapter of life, of preparing for your life's work, is be patient. Be patient and believe in yourself, really believe in yourself. I had doubts along the way. I had great supporters. I think that self-doubt, as women, we have the imposter syndrome in many ways, but we're there for a reason, and really listen to your community, listen to your sponsors, listen to your supporters, and lean in and be grateful for every moment that you have, because 20 becomes 30, 30 becomes 40, 40 becomes 50, 50 becomes 60. And before you know it, you're 101 and you've had an amazing life like Hazel. So, just be mindful of what you're setting forward. And you don't have to have all the answers at 20. Learn from others. That's what I would say.
And I've said this in my talk, but it's really very meaningful to me to understand that the past may shape us and we learn from the past, but keep your focus firmly on the future and what's ahead. It's very easy to fall back into that trap of just dwelling on the past and revisiting. And I think as women, we tend to do that because we're trying to analyze. And at some point, you've got to just say, what's next? The other thing I would say that I had a really difficult time doing, and I know that every woman I've ever spoken to that's been successful has said the same thing. It's really hard to get away from just focusing on work because you want to be successful, because you want to achieve certain goals. Invest in building deep and meaningful connections. There is nothing that will pay off dividends more than that. I've seen it across the board, not just in terms of better health, not just in terms of happiness, but in terms of the surprising people, who will come forward at moments in your life that you've built relationships with that will get you moving, forward on those times when you need that lift. So make time to have a life that's not just about work. And finally, I definitely agree with Deborah on learning, keep learning. I always say that wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources. So I don't just mean learn from other successful individuals. Talk to people, learn from people, understand, what shapes the human condition, and read everything you can get your hands on. I'm a big believer in that. You will learn that part of leadership is connecting different dots, and you can only do that if you really are drawing from, a lot of different learnings and inspiration.
I have a question for Inez, and that is, tell us about your logo.
The Brain Health Nexus logo, yes. So it is about the brain and a global community coming together to advance brain health and brain research. And, we used to always think in a very siloed way about doing research at one institution or maybe in one region or maybe in one country. And, now we really understand that there's such a complexity to understanding brain health and many of the big challenges. The only way forward is if we figure out how to connect with other countries. And I think that's really important in an era of data science, where we've got to figure out, how do we address the ethical, social, and legal implications of sharing data so that we can do it effectively and be able to draw from much larger sets of people that are inclusive of the populations of the world.
Super. I've got a question for both, Crystal, and that is, looking forward, what excites you the most? Like when you think about what's ahead with all the work that you're doing, what are you most excited about and really looking forward to?
I guess I'll take that. I think the future is so bright, and I think we need to, as I think has been stated, is, some women leaders are dropping out, but I think we have to support one another, to encourage ourselves to stay with it, to move on, to empower one another. So I think the power of community, the power of three, the women empowering women, I've seen it from all different sides, is that, but no excuses, we can do it. And just keep showing up and keep moving forward.
Super.
And I would add that, part of what's exciting about the future is not knowing what's ahead. I think that you can plan your life to a certain degree, but what's amazing about careers that are so rich and that, forge new pathways is that we look, at opportunities. And that's the thing about stepping up. We say, yes, we'll take the risk, we'll try this. And you know what, one opportunity doesn't work out, as I said, you move on. And then there's something else that just, but you've got to keep that driving forward and keep focusing forward. And then you won't miss that. And that's why it's so important, not to keep looking back, but always to be thinking about what's possible. And, in this era, a lot of it is about looking at your skills, looking at your experiences, and thinking about how do you apply them differently to different ecosystems. And we all try to do that. And I think the power of connection is also that. You start to realize how you may have actually more in common and more to contribute in areas that wouldn't have actually been on your radar.
Super. Well, again, my dad, who died at 93, his favorite quote was, as long as you're vertical, you've got another chance. So in other words, keep going. Crystal, Lorene has a question.
Yes, it's a very interesting one. It's an interesting one for me. What is your view on development and AI in relation to brain health and the future? Artificial intelligence, if anyone doesn't know what AI means.
Sure. So AI can be a really powerful tool in analyzing data. And, that's been one of the challenges that, we went through this period where there was this, a surge of let's gather data, let's build data sets. And we didn't really think about, well, what do you do with all that data? Something doesn't just magically happen. And so what the AI tools are giving us is the ability to really analyze this data and find meaning from this data. And one of the things I said about data is that even if you're looking at brain health, I would like to see the day when we're not just looking at data that is related to the brain, but also the relationship between the brain and environment and climate change. We have other data sets. How do we aggregate that so we truly understand what is it that leads to good brain health? And it's factors that may be outside of the brain itself. And we've got to start now bringing that together. We know there's a relationship, for example, between heart health and brain health, or the gut and the brain, but we've tended to keep all that data separate. So when you look at a large study like Framingham for heart health, maybe we want to find a way to build in brain health indicators and bring these two together.
Super. Okay, anything else, Crystal?
No, I think that about, just a second, wait. Speaking of looking forward and continuing to learn, is there a book or podcast that you would recommend we add to our list? I love this question. We'll start with you, Deborah.
Well, it's funny. I was having a conversation. It's amazing how people share books and stories. And last week I was telling a story to a mentee that I have, and I was asking them what their 3 words were. And they said, well, I'm doing a lot of surrendering. I'm like, okay, surrender it is. And I shared this story that I had to let go of someone in the sense of not dismiss them from your team, but a friendship. And I used the word surrender. And next thing you know, the book showed up from my mentee on surrendering from Michael Singer. So I've got it in my many books, but I think part of your journey in life is sometimes you have to surrender to what's not serving you anymore. And listening to someone and hearing where they are. So my next phase of reading is going to be surrendering everything. What serves you today may not serve you tomorrow.
And I'm sure you're expecting me to recommend a brain book or a brain health book. And you know, in fact, I do read a lot about the brain, and you know, you have to really keep up with what's happening in the science. But I actually really gain a lot by reading in completely different areas. And I specifically like to read about people's stories. So my outside the box, I just finished reading Jan Wenner's book on Like a Rolling Stone and how he founded Rolling Stone magazine. It was fascinating to me, but again, it's about, you know, nobody's life is a straight path. And sometimes it's remarkable as you start to read about people who've been successful in many different areas of life, that there are some common traits, you know, and that everybody has to go through failure and resiliency and having the fortitude to just keep driving on because they're clear about their vision. So that's what I really encourage, is think broadly and read about people you admire, people in fields that may be completely different from yours, and understand, you know, what the thinking is behind, you know, their success and their path.
Super. Okay, I'm just going to profile these two books, Crystal. This is Turnaround. That is Lisa Gable's book. And I just got it on the weekend and started into it, and it is exceptional. For anybody who is dealing with any new project ahead, really, I would highly recommend this. And the one word that she emphasizes constantly is that we behave in a humane way. Humanity is everything. And I think you highlighted that, you know, relationships really matter. The other one is Impromptu, and this is Judith Humphrey, who just keeps on putting these books out, which is amazing. And this one is Prepare to be Spontaneous, Impromptu, Leading in the Moment. So again, those two, and Crystal will put the details in the chat so you have them. In terms of next, we don't have any more Mondays until Monday, March the 6th. And again, it'll be 12:30 to 1:30. It'll be virtual. We have Dr. Imogen Coe, who is a STEM guru and just won a fabulous science award. So she's going to have a great story to share. Really, really good. And it will be particularly interesting for each of us, but also to pass along to our younger selves, our 20-year-old something somewhere, not necessarily female, but STEM, of course, is the future in so many ways. And then Paul Chapman and I are hosting a breakfast session the following morning, March the 7th in Collingwood. We are champions for Yvonne Hamlin, who became the mayor in Collingwood. And she is a AAA1 rock star who's got a huge opportunity to make a difference in a growing community. And we know the International Women's Day theme is embracing equity. So that's what she'll be talking about. And we'll videotape it, so we'll put it up so that you can view it. And then after that, we're working on a Mind, Body, Spirit boot camp, which will have the same theme, Daring and Caring Women Leaders for Positive Impact. And that will be in May. Initially, it was at Magna, but we may be changing the location. We're definitely changing the date because I had a conflict. So stay tuned. And if you have guest speakers or you want to be a guest speaker, everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome. Thank you again, Inez and Deborah. Exceptional. And we'll make sure that everyone has your contact info. And seriously, go on LinkedIn and sign up to be friends with all these amazing people. They're all terrific.